Hello! So today I'm going to be talking about Stephen King's Fairy Tale. Now, I am not a Stephen King mega fan, but I have read a fair amount of his work and I would consider myself a fan. But I'm not one of those people who thinks that everything he does is gold. Far from it. In fact, there's quite a few Stephen King novels that I've read that I've actually really hated. So before we crack on with reviewing Fairy Tale, here's a quick list of all the King I have read to date. Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, Cujo, Pet Sematary, It, Misery, Cell, Under the Dome, 11/22/63, The Outsider, Billy Summers, and now this. And if you have read any of the books on that list, you will know that there is some absolute bangers on that list. I mean, absolute crackers. And because of that, it does mean that I always get very, very excited whenever a new Stephen King book is released. So I was really looking forward to reading this one. This review is going to have no spoilers whatsoever. I'm only going to cover the information that the inside dust jacket gives us. So, what's this book about? Well, in this book we follow a character called Charlie, a guy in his late teens whose mum has passed away and he is looking after his alcoholic father. Now, looking after his dad has forced him to grow up quickly, which might be why at times it feels like Charlie is actually a guy in his late 20s as opposed to a 17-year-old boy. Through a chance encounter, Charlie becomes friends with an elderly man called Howard Bowditch. He's the scary guy in their neighbourhood. All of the kids are scared of his house. He ends up working for Howard Bowditch as his carer, and he soon falls in love with Howard's dog, Radar. I'm going to get this out of the way right now. I loved Radar the dog. I mean, I loved him. I thought he was great, and I was terrified that something might happen to him. In Howard's back garden is a shed, kind of creepy looking shed, and inside that shed is a portal into another world. Now, the next bit of information isn't actually covered on the blurb, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because it's so bloody obvious. As soon as you start reading the first page, you know where this is going. But Charlie and Radar end up going down the portal and finding themselves in this other world. The unique selling points for this novel is that it pulls very heavily in the fantasy world from fairy tales. So we get a lot of details of like Grimm's fairy tales sort of weaving themselves into the fabric of this fantasy world that Charlie and Radar find themselves in, and how that kind of Charlie has a way of navigating and sort of identifying everything around him through his knowledge of those fairy tales. We also do get a fair amount of Lovecraftian stuff going on in here as well. The first third of this book is all about the relationships. It's all about establishing Charlie, his relationship with his dad, his relationship with Howard, and his relationship with Radar. Stephen King likes to take his time with his characters for you to build a connection with them, and this kind of like unique friendship that happens between Charlie and Howard and Radar is one of the strongest aspects of this book. So the first third, I whipped through it, I was well in. The book then takes a drastic turn when we go down into the portal and enter this new world, and the rest of the book is pretty much a kind of into a portal, Alice down the rabbit hole style adventure of Charlie discovering this new world, the rules of this world, and what he can do to help it. This novel is a mixed bag, a real mixed bag, so I think the best way for me to do it without jumping back and forwards and rambling all over the shop is just to give you a list of my likes and dislikes. And I think if maybe my dislikes don't bother you that much, you would be all right with those things, then actually maybe this is a run out and buy. But yeah, here we go. So I'm going to start with my likes. First like, characters. Love the characters. Every character felt well-rounded, really well established, and I thought the relationships and the way they built felt organic and natural. I think King is just very good at this. It's one of his strongest writing talents, is establishing and creating really incredibly well-rounded characters with very rich backstories. And I think this aspect of the book is fantastic. It's great. My next like would be Radar the dog. If you're a dog lover, then I think you are going to really, really love this aspect of the book. Just his relationship with Radar, what he's willing to do for Radar, and the connection between the two of them is just lovely. It made me feel all warm and tingly inside. I really liked it. My final like is King's prose. Now, a lot of people have always said that King's prose is quite pedestrian, and it is, but I find he does such a great job of hooking you, taking you on the journey nice and simply. He has a way of being descriptive, but not over the top. He gives you just enough information for you to kind of picture the world, but also fill in the blanks. He's leaving that space for you to create this world for yourself, and I think that's something that King has always done really, really well. And now on to the cons. First con is, it's a portal story. That's it. It's a portal story, you know? Like, the older I get, and I don't know if I might be alone here, but the older I get, the more I think to myself that a portal story is just, it's just a bit lazy and feels incredibly easy to do as far as a storytelling device is concerned, you know? Like, I could be like, here's a bathtub, Charlie. Depending on what bath bomb you use, you can go to any continent in the world. Or I could be like, here's a Chesterfield. Sit on this Chesterfield and think of Chester, and it takes you there. Or maybe flip your pillow to the cool side of the pillow and you can go to an alternative Antarctica. I don't know, you know, like Portal stories just feel very simple and a little bit lazy. And seeming as this is the main sort of structural device within this novel, yeah, I wanted something more. The next con is the fact that constantly throughout it, now I know this story is being narrated by a 26-year-old Charlie as he's talking about his experiences as a 17-year-old, so I get that. So sometimes that voice is going to sound older. However, when we are being given the thoughts and feelings of Charlie at that time, what he said, what he did, what he was thinking in that moment, he felt a lot older than 17. And I know you can wing in the old, he's had to look after his alcoholic father and that's forced him to grow up right at the beginning. You know, you're dropping the breadcrumbs there for him to be able to sound older. But I just didn't buy it. At times when I was reading it, I was going, a 17-year-old wouldn't make that choice. No 17-year-old would make that choice. Even a really smart 17-year-old wouldn't make that choice. So you have to really suspend your disbelief in this moment. And I don't know, there's just... he just felt, especially in the fantasy side of this, things he was doing, what was happening, the world is affecting him and he's maybe stepping up in that moment. But yeah, I don't know. I just felt like he wasn't authentic enough as a 17-year-old for me throughout. There's moments totally in, other moments it just didn't quite feel right. The next sort of dislike I have with this book is that it felt like, especially the fantasy aspect, it was really well-trodden ground. Like, I've read so many stories and so many books that do things exactly the same. All the beats, all the characters, the need, damsel in distress, and I understand that it's pulling from fairy tales to help sort of tell this fantasy world. But there's other fantasy stories that I've read that aren't based on fairy tales that also felt incredibly similar to this. I don't know, I was just reading it and going, this is doing nothing new at all, especially in comparison to the stuff or the fantasy that I've read. And there you go, that was my list of pros and cons, likes and dislikes. There were a few other smaller things, like the pop culture references felt a little bit unnecessary at times, but considering the voice that was telling the story, I was kind of alright with it. But overall, I thought this book was alright, nothing more. I didn't really hate any aspects, just disliked aspects of it. It felt like well-trodden ground, nothing I haven't read a million times before, but I did enjoy the journey. I was hooked. Stephen King's writing is good. It hooked me, and, I had a good time going on that journey. But when I really think about it, I think I'm going to forget about this book pretty quickly. So overall, I would say, if a rating out of 5, I would give it 2.5 stars. It's all right. If you're a King mega fan, then I would give it a read. I've never read any of the Dark Tower books, so I have no idea if this book links in with those in any way whatsoever. So there could have been some Easter eggs in there that I was missing, which is why I'm not maybe getting as much from it as I could have. But I'll allow you, the Mega King fans, to tell me if there is any connections to the Dark Tower in this or not. But yeah, so have you read this book? How did you find it? What did you think of it? Please let me know in the comments below. And I will see you all on the next one.